Out west, regular folks and gunslingers crossed deserts, trains, and wooden towns, while gold and cattle changed hands overnight. Robberies vanished from the records, duels had conflicting stories, and caravans split apart into nothing. Let's open the map and follow every clue. 15 Western cases that still keep a lot of people up at night. Number 15. Who was Billy the Kid, really? Behind the nickname was Henry McCarty, also known as William H. Bonney. Born in New York in 1859, he moved west after his father's death and got by doing odd jobs, petty thefts, and ranch work. In New Mexico, the Lincoln County War pulled him into rival gangs and shaped his legend. He was a fast shooter, didn't talk much, and stood up for his own. In 1881 in Fort Sumner, Sheriff Pat Garrett claimed to have killed him and closed the case. It seemed like the end of the story, but it turned into a maze. Decades later, men showed up swearing they were the Kid. The loudest case came in 1950, when Brushy Bill Roberts asked Governor Thomas Mabry for a pardon, claiming to be Henry McCarty. He left without the pardon and without proof. Since then, records, testimonies, and forensic proposals haven't settled the question. What if Garrett staged the death to cut deals and end a local war? The answer may lie in documents that might never surface, which is exactly what keeps the legend alive. Number 14. The hidden treasure of the Dalton Gang. In the early 1890s, brothers Grat, Bob, and Emmett Dalton rode through Kansas, and what was then the Oklahoma Territory, robbing banks and trains. It wasn't just boldness, they had a system, swapping horses and using alternate routes. But once the dust settled, one question still echoed. Where did the money go? The most common theory is simple. Living on the run made it risky to carry large amounts of cash or silver. To avoid searches and suspicion, the gang supposedly split up the loot and buried small portions near places they knew, quiet lowlands and bends of seasonal creeks. Instead of chests, they used canvas bundles, tins, and ammo boxes, buried in a hurry and marked with secret signs like cuts on trees or stacked stones. Stories place these spots in southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma, areas the gang traveled for months. No reliable maps were ever found. What remains are oral memories, newspaper notes, and mentions in lost letters. The end came on October 5, 1892, in Coffeyville. Trying to rob two banks at once, the brothers ran into armed townsfolk. The shootout took over the street. Grat and Bob were killed. Emmett survived with gunshot wounds and served time. Even after being freed, he never revealed the locations. If there were codes, they died with the men. Since then, treasure hunters have scoured hills with metal detectors, dug through archives, and drawn new maps. Marks turn up here and there, almost always junk. Still, there's that feeling, maybe just a few steps off an old trail. A canvas bag full of coins is still waiting for the right shovel. Number 13. The Curse of Bodie. On the slopes of the Sierra Nevada in California lies Bodie, a town that boomed with gold in the late 19th century and emptied out when the metal ran dry. Houses still stand, goods sit on shelves, walls bear the marks of cold and dust. Out of this frozen-in-time scene came the story that won't let go of the place. Anyone who takes anything from Bodie, a nail, a shard, a button, brings a streak of bad luck with them. It's not some grand curse. It's the idea that removing something breaks a pact with the town's memory. The likely origin is simple. Park staff spread the story to stop theft. The plan took on a life of its own. Since the mid-20th century, the park's mailroom has received packages returning objects, along with letters describing accidents, job losses, debts, illnesses, and breakups. Some people hold on to the item for months and, after a string of bad luck, send it back. Others mail it right after the first mishap, hoping to turn things around. Skeptics see it as nothing more than a useful superstition. Still, the constant flow of cases and the urgency in those letters keep the legend alive. Today, Bodie stands as an open-air archive, its ruins and displays telling the full cycle of the Old West: boom, abandonment, memory. And for anyone walking those streets, one question lingers. In a place that survived by staying whole, is it really worth risking a souvenir in your pocket? Number 12. The Legend of Jean Baptiste. In the mid-19th century, when Utah was still a rough frontier, A mysterious immigrant named Jean Baptiste arrived in Salt Lake City. He became a gravedigger and for a while did the job as expected. But out of sight, he started reopening graves after burials to steal clothes, jewelry, and personal items left with the dead. Easy money in a place where almost nothing came easy. The scheme fell apart in 1862. The body of outlaw Moroni Clausen was dug up and found without its burial clothes. At Baptiste's house, authorities discovered piles of funeral garments and personal belongings sorted by name. Word spread fast and a lynching seemed likely. To calm public anger, officials decided to exile him to Fremont Island, in the Great Salt Lake. Weeks later, when patrols went back to check, Baptiste was gone. All they found were traces of makeshift life: a torn-down shelter, sun-dried animal hides, cattle bones. Of Baptiste himself, no sign. From there, the stories took off. Did he build a raft and cross the lake, try to swim and never make it? Did someone help him disappear? No one ever found proof. That's why his name still drifts through travelers' tales. Every dry season, someone swears they've seen strange marks in the sand and wonders if the island still hides the last clue to the gravedigger who turned into a grave robber and vanished. Number 11. At the end of the 19th century, along the shores of Pitt Lake in British Columbia, a rumor began that never died. A Catsidy man named Slumac had supposedly found a gold deposit somewhere deep between the lake, ravines, and tributaries. He was hanged in 1891, convicted of murdering Louis B., and that's when the story took on new weight. They say Slumac would return from time to time with enough gold to spark envy, but he never revealed the route. After his execution, word spread that he left behind a curse. Anyone who tried to follow his path wouldn't make it back alive. The region didn't make things easy. The forest was dense, the weather changed fast, and the rivers stayed icy even in summer. Still, people showed up in New Westminster and headed up the Pitt River with rough maps and shaky partnerships. Some accounts mention markings on rocks. Others tell of gold nuggets found in gravel banks, always far from witnesses. There are journals that end abruptly in early autumn, when the rain washes out trails and floods crossings. The names of the missing became part of local folklore, and every disappearance only fueled the legend of the curse. Over time, the story turned into a test of faith. Some say the mine never existed, just a mix of fear and greed that grew into myth. Others swear the gold is real, hidden somewhere along a quiet river branch, waiting for the right person to show up at the right time. So if you heard the sound of an unfamiliar stream out there, would you keep going or turn back, remembering the stories that still echo around Pitt Lake? Number 10. In the Colorado desert of Southern California, a persistent story keeps circulating. An old ship once sailed into inland waters, got stranded and was buried by sand, maybe with pearls on board. There's some logic behind it. For centuries, the Colorado River formed shifting lagoons and channels. In flood years, coastal ships could travel far inland. That's where the theory comes from. A vessel might have drifted into a shallow branch, lost its way when the water receded, and was left behind as the region dried up. Since the 19th century, reports have surfaced after sandstorms, hulls spotted in ravines, masts silhouetted on the horizon. The versions don't match. Some claim it was a Pacific galleon. Others swear they saw a long Viking-style ship, an idea with no real basis. Some even link the route to Juan de Iturbe and the Pearls of La Paz. Expeditions have followed maps of the old riverbed toward the Salton Sink. The results are always the same. No reliable set of remains, no preserved wood, no record that ties it all together. Skeptics point out that heat, salt, and wind destroy wood fast. Still, when the dunes shift and the afternoon light hits just right, hope flickers again. Maybe something is still glinting beneath the sand. With no proof, the legend keeps calling people back for one more search. Number 9. The Lost Gold of Doc Noss. On the slopes of Victorio Peak in the Hembrillo Basin of southern New Mexico, a stubborn story keeps going. It tells of gold bars, a crack leading to a hidden chamber, and a man who didn't know when to stop. In 1937, Milton Ernest Doc Noss, a self-taught chiropractor and treasure hunter, claimed to have found a stash of metal and old papers inside the mountain. Convinced it was Spanish gold, He used explosives to widen the entrance. The blast made the ceiling collapse, sealing the passage. Refusing to give up, Doc spent years selling shares in what he called a colossal find. With money from partners, he drew maps, led digs, and promised to split the gold bars. The stories grew, and so did the debts. In March 1949, during a fight over control and money, Doc Noss was shot and killed by his associate Charlie Ryan, who was later acquitted. Since then, the key piece, the exact entry point, has been lost among contradictions and torn maps. Today, the peak lies inside a military area, and access is restricted. Still, some say that under the rock rests a fortune big enough to turn friends into enemies, and a dream into tragedy. If anyone ever finds the right spot, the story starts all over again. Number 8. The Mystery of Poncho Villa. In the tense rhythm of the Mexican Revolution, Francisco Poncho Villa became a central and hard-to-define figure. He was the commander who led cavalry columns, the former outlaw who knew the trails of the North better than any official map, and for many rural people, the ally who stood up to local bosses and army posts. On July 20, 1923, in Parral, Chihuahua, his story ended in a daylight ambush. The impact was immediate. Public vigils, headlines, promises of remembrance. Villa was buried in the Hidalgo del Parral cemetery, but the mourning didn't close the chapter. In 1926, news spread like wildfire. His tomb had been disturbed and the skull was gone. That's when the theories began. One blamed an art dealer hoping to cash in on revolutionary relics and ship the skull to a collector abroad. Another pointed to U.S. agents, eager for a trophy with symbolic value. And then there's the theory that refuses to die, that the Skull and Bones Society at Yale and New Haven took it, famous for its myths about skulls kept in private rooms. Geronimo's name often comes up in those same stories, fueling speculation. Officials and enthusiasts dug through records, ports, and testimonies. The Mexican government tried to recover whatever it could, but nothing solid ever surfaced. Tributes to Villa continued. Statues, books, and battles over his political legacy. The skull's whereabouts, though, were never confirmed. And that's what keeps the mystery alive. Between late-coming accounts, missing documents, and the interests of powerful people, which version still stands when we weigh what's known against what we choose to remember? Number 7. Albert Jennings Fountain. Albert Jennings Fountain was a lawyer, politician, and war veteran. By the late 19th century, his voice carried real weight in the courts of the New Mexico Territory, where fighting cattle theft often meant going up against armed men. On February 1, 1896, he left Lincoln with his son Henry to wrap up matters related to a case. They set off south in a wagon and were last seen near the White Sands Dunes. After that, the trail vanished. When they didn't return, locals and lawmen began to search. The wagon turned up first, stopped and empty. On the ground, dried blood, a spent cartridge, and tracks from several horses cutting across the rough terrain. It was enough to suggest an ambush. Suspicion quickly fell on the same men Fountain had been prosecuting. A posse was formed, and Sheriff Pat Garrett, famous for hunting outlaws, was called in. The pressure was intense, but the clues faded fast. No bodies, no confession, no solid evidence to tie the case together. Time did the rest. Witnesses went silent, stories conflicted, and the investigation lost steam. The disappearance of father and son became an open wound in the region. Since then, the theories have competed. Many believe it was revenge by cattle rustlers who buried the bodies in the desert. Others point to Fountain's political career and his enemies, seeing it as payback tangled up in justice, power, and fear. Number 6. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. By the late 19th century, two names had blazed across the map of the Old West: Butch Cassidy and his partner, known as the Sundance Kid. They hit railroads and banks, running with the Wild Bunch, a gang that traded gunfire, switched horses, and vanished into the dust. Up to that point, everything's clear. The mystery begins in Bolivia. Official records say that on November 7, 1908, two men cornered in San Vicente got into a shootout with police and died. They were supposedly buried right there. Case closed. Except the paperwork doesn't quite line up. There's no solid proof, and the graves have never produced anything that holds up under real testing. From there, the trail twists. Reports of a familiar face spotted in Texas, whispered comments in Wyoming, and family stories that dodge questions. In 1934, a book called Bandit Invincible appeared, written by William T. Phillips, and some swore the author was Butch himself. The book claimed that both men escaped Bolivia and made it back to the United States. Whether that version is true or not, no one can say for sure. But the doubt keeps the legend alive. Every time a new document, old photo, or late confession turns up, the same question comes back. Did they really die in San Vicente, or slip quietly off stage? Number 5. Pearl Hart. In 1890s Arizona, when news traveled faster than trains, a Canadian woman named Pearl Hart, born Pearl Taylor in 1871, decided to ditch the life everyone expected of her. She left her marriage, drifted through mining towns and saloons, and learned how to get by on her own. In 1899, with a partner named Joe Boot, she cut her hair short, put on men's clothes, and picked the Globe-Florence route for a bold move. Stop the stagecoach at Cane Springs Canyon, take whatever was there, and disappear. They made off with about $431 and 2 guns. Pearl even handed $1 back to each passenger, a small gesture that made big headlines. The escape didn't last long. A few days later, Sheriff James Truman caught them both. In the papers, Pearl became a scandalous figure, a woman with a gun. A jury first acquitted her of robbery, but another charge followed, interfering with the U.S. mail, and she got 5 years in Yuma prison. There, she gave interviews and posed for photographs. After 18 months, she was pardoned by Governor Alexander O. Bodie and tried to cash in on her fame by reenacting the holdup on stage. After that, the trail fades. A cigar shop in Kansas City, rumors in Arizona, maybe Mexico. Nothing solid. That final haze is part of why her name stuck around. When the records stop, the public fills in the blanks, and Pearl Hart knew how to use that silence to keep her story moving. Number 4. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. In the Superstition Mountains, there's a story that's been passed down for generations. It tells of Jacob Waltz, a German nicknamed the Dutchman, and a hidden gold mine that made him rich in the 19th century. No one really knows how he found the vein. Some say he struck a deal with an Apache family. Others mention a partner, Jacob Weiser, who met an uncertain fate. When Waltz died in 1891, he never revealed the location. But he left behind a trail of crumbs, vague directions, an entrance that the afternoon sun would hide, and rocks shaped like a sombrero. That was enough to spark an endless search. Veterans, broke miners, and dreamers with crooked maps all came looking. Some got lost. Others swore they saw markings on the rocks or glimpsed an open vein just before a storm rolled in. Out of those came tales of bad luck, disappearances, and broken promises. The fuel that keeps the legend alive. In the end, the mine stopped being a spot on a map and became a test of appetite, for luck and for risk. Anyone who walks those trails learns to read the shadows, the wind, and the silence, because the next clue might be just a few steps away, and no one wants to be the last to notice it. Number 3. The Thunderbird of Tombstone. For many indigenous peoples across North America, the Thunderbird rules over the storms. Settlers used to dismiss it as legend, but in April 1890, Tombstone, Arizona, made the news. The Tombstone epitaph reported that a group of cowboys had brought down a massive creature in the desert, bigger than any known bird. The article claimed a wingspan of nearly 160 feet and a body the size of a horse, numbers that sent the story flying across the country. For some, it was a chance to connect oral tradition with the real world. For others, it sounded like a mistake, or pure sensationalism. When historians and naturalists later revisited the sources, almost nothing remained beyond press clippings and conflicting memories. No carcass, no bones, no verified measurements. Skeptics suggested the cowboys might have seen a large vulture or a condor, and that the rest was just exaggeration. Others point to prehistoric Territorns as a distant inspiration. Even so, Tombstone earned its spot on the map of imagination, a crossroads of native tradition, the Old West, and humanity's old hunger to come face to face with the unknown. Number 2. Long before Roswell made headlines in 1947, an earlier incident in New Mexico was already raising eyebrows. In 1878, in what's now Roosevelt County, a farmer named John Martin was found dead, and the sheriff couldn't close the case. The body had strange marks that no one could explain. The scene didn't look like a robbery, and nobody ever came forward. Word spread through the saloons. Had something come from the sky? With few records to go on, every local built their own version. Some swore they'd seen lights at night. Others blamed a fence dispute, an old grudge, or an accident that got twisted in the retelling. What actually existed were gaps. No artifacts recovered, no useful clues. Just the desert's silence. Decades later, when newspapers started talking about wreckage near Roswell, a lot of folks thought back to Martin. There was no proof linking the two stories, but the coincidence was enough to keep the mystery alive. The 1878 case ended up as an unsettling prologue. It doesn't solve anything, but it opens the door and invites you to keep looking. Number 1. The mystery of Coochis. Coochis led the Chokonen, one of the Chiricahua Apache groups, during the Apache Wars that swept across the American Southwest between 1849 and 1886. He knew when to fight and when to negotiate, always with one clear goal: to protect his people's land and independence. His reputation came as much from his ambushes, which baffled the military, as from his truces, which spared lives. Toward the end of his life, weakened by illness, Coochis died in 1874. That's where the mystery begins. His body was taken to the Dragoon Mountains in southeastern Arizona, a maze of rock formations that had long served as a refuge for the Chiricahua. Accounts say only a few warriors buried him in a hidden crevice, and that Tom Jeffords, his ally in negotiations, was there. The secrecy had a purpose: to keep outsiders and grave robbers from disturbing the site. Since then, trails have been searched, caves mapped, and countless promises made by guides and adventurers. Nothing conclusive has ever surfaced. The silence of the mountains says it all. The memory of that people doesn't need a monument. That's what keeps the mystery alive. More than just a spot on a map, it's a pact of loyalty to the ancestors. Anyone walking through those canyons steps into a story that's still alive, demanding respect, and leaving behind the question that endures: where is Coochis?